More than 10% of people in Florida can't find a job, and they've been trying for months and months. In this edition of Community Crossroads, we'll offer some tips on getting that job. Hello, I'm Dr. Risa Samra, and we're coming to you from the David Brinkley studio at Barry University. Though there are small signs of a recovering economy, if you're unemployed, that's not much comfort. Today we'll discuss what to do and what not to do with some experts and hear from someone who's pounding the pavement. Today I'd like to introduce you to our distinguished panel. First, on my right, we have Ron Daratany, who's the president and founder of DMR Global Recruiting. Besides recruiting executives, he helps displaced professionals reestablish their careers by providing career counseling. And to his right, we have Michelle Villalobos, founder of Mavista Consulting, Inc. She teaches business concepts and skills to professionals such as marketing, sales, networking, and branding, and she likes to take a fun and entertaining approach to that. On her right, we have Zachary Garvin, who's an instructional recruiter for Miami-Dade Public Schools. He recruits teachers from all over the world. And finally, we have Darlene Jarquin, who has a wonderful background. I read up on it. She has a bachelor's degree in public relations and journalism. She worked 10 years for the Florida Department of Transportation, and then she worked as an executive for the city of Miami for 3 years, and then unfortunately she was downsized. Welcome.
Thank you.
All of you. So
Thank you.
Can we open by asking, what's the forecast for the 2010 job market?
Well, the 2010 job market is extremely competitive. Unemployment has dipped below 10%, so there is some positive. Economists expect that there is going to be some hiring in the first 3 quarters of this year, and that's based upon the fact that jobless claims have dropped. So for 23 straight months, there were significant job losses. Now the jobless claims are actually dipping, and we're actually seeing an uptick in our recruiting division as employers are requesting our services to help them find key people.
So can we expound on that? What are employers looking for now?
Well, employers are looking for, you were mentioning quality.
Yes.
There are 15 million people out of work. So there are an awful lot of people that are out there. So one of the challenges that employees face is going through and finding those quality people. And what they're looking for are people that hit all the basic components of what personal branding is, what personal grooming is, being on time, and coming prepared for that interview, and knowing something about the people in which you're interviewing with. So if a person comes prepared and they come well dressed and they brand themselves appropriately, they're going to stand out from the people that don't hit that checklist when they come for interviews.
Yeah, and the filtering process now has become a lot more aggressive, I think. You hear this repeatedly, but it's something that I witness time and time again, and I'm sure my colleagues do too. Don't hand in a resume that has typographical or grammatical errors in it. That's immediately going to get you rejected. I don't care what kind of qualifications you have, and there's really literally no sense for that to occur nowadays with spell check and having somebody being able to review your materials for you. Come into the interview prepared as if you are ready, willing, and able to accept this job on the spot and assume the responsibilities, even if you're doing something as simple as dropping off the resume. Some people tend to think that they're just passing by the office, so it's okay for them to be a lot more casual. You don't know who's standing in there. It could be the head of HR standing. I know the head of our human resources department is constantly all over the building and always has her ear to the ground and wants to keep her finger on the pulse of who's out there and who's coming in. And so you want to have this constant awareness that you need to look the part, act the part, and dress the part at all times when you're in a professional environment.
Besides the obvious of going to some professional organizations that might be related to your area of expertise, what other forms of social media can we use? Or what kinds of accidental approaches can we take? Places that you wouldn't think of so often as being the most obvious.
I got one, and then I'm sure all of you. We tell all of our clients, and now I'm coming at it from an employer perspective. I have a company, and we represent national corporations. We tell everyone to put a profile on LinkedIn. And why do they put a profile on LinkedIn? Because if you're a job seeker, most job seekers will go to Monster and what you were referencing, Michelle. But the good thing about LinkedIn is that even job seekers that aren't looking for a position passively are on there. And you can be found. And recruiters, hiring managers, and all that are using LinkedIn as a tool like Monster. So even if you're not looking for a job, LinkedIn is an extraordinary key tool to utilize to put all of you. I have every member of my company on LinkedIn. And they're on LinkedIn not because I want them to go looking for a job, but I want to market my company. So for a person that is looking for a job, they can easily be found on a Monster, but they can also be found on LinkedIn and even Facebook and Twitter and all of those other places, and it's free. So to me, it's about exposure. It's about hitting the numbers, but being very cognizant of what you're projecting on those sites.
Absolutely.
Because hiring managers will be looking at those sites, and if you're trying to put a professional exterior on there, but then everything that you've done personally is on there, it's going to give a very mixed picture and probably are going to be disqualified for the reasons that you talked about, Zachary, which is there's an awful lot of people out there and there's an awful lot of competition, and if you don't hit all those key components, someone else is going to, and you're going to be disqualified.
Yes.
Darlene, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to add something too. The thing about LinkedIn that makes it so great is that almost as soon as you put in your profile, if you don't have a lot of search results for your name, it's going to rise to the very top. So you look like a professional, you know? So it gets you a search result for your name that you control. Nobody else wrote it about you. You wrote it about yourself. So you get to manage what it says. So you get to position yourself in the best light. So number one, that's the key. The second thing about LinkedIn is a lot of people got laid off in the last 23 months, I guess. And they're realizing, hey, I don't have a lot of job security. You know, maybe I left this job and I walked away from my Rolodex if I was a salesperson, because you do. You know, when you have all your contacts and your connections in LinkedIn, you own them. They're attached to your name. They're not your company's contacts anymore. It's your name. You get to make your relationships, and you get to build those relationships, and you never have to walk away from them again. So, and then the final thing is, I think you do want to have a Facebook page. You want to control, you know, with the privacy settings, what people see, but you're a human being, and people want to hire and do business with human beings. You know, so I think it's fine to have your Facebook and have some personal things on there, as long as it's really aligned with who you are and what you want a prospective employer to see. So,
How you want to be projected?
yes.
Sure.
Darlene, what has your experience been like
Well,
these last couple months or
well,
year?
let me tell you, it's been really frustrating. I thought I had the right degree and the great experience, but it's such a different experience to be out in, you know, in this site. Because as an administrator that I was before, I was on the other side of the table interviewing people to get jobs. Now I'm having to be on the other side interviewed and trying to get a position with different companies. I've also used, you know, their suggestion, and I've put my profile on LinkedIn, and I've also used other sources, but the one that has worked the best for me is networking. You guys had mentioned before, knowing people has gotten me. I'm currently doing some freelancing as well, you know, while I find a new job. And knowing people, being in the right place at the right time, giving out my information has helped me find the little freelance jobs that I currently have. And it's been really frustrating, but hopefully, as he mentioned before, this is, you know, it's going to get better.
Right. I have
Maybe
one. I want to add
recommendations?
something. I have a suggestion. The LinkedIn profiles has connections. Then there's connections of those connections. And that's the beauty of networking, because the U.S. Department of Labor says 70% of all jobs are found through networking. So it's not just your connections, it's your connections and the connections of those connections. Because even when we're trying to get new business, I'll go onto my connections and ask them who they know that they can introduce me to or an email to make that cold call less cold. So it's not just the connections, it's the connections of those connections as well. And that all of a sudden becomes like a big spider web. And all of a sudden you're talking and networking with more people.
And I'd like to offer an even greater suggestion. You can always come and work for the school system as a teacher with those skills that she brings to the table. This is the type of quality that I'm talking about, that we now have an opportunity, you know, with being the largest employer in Miami-Dade County now to look at, someone who comes to the table with all of these life skills that they can bring and make relevant into the classroom and bring a curriculum to life. This is the opportunity that we have found ourselves embracing and seeing a lot more when it comes to hiring teachers, and we welcome it.
So you can redirect her.
Absolutely.
I'll give you my information.
Absolutely, we can.
Well, what's great about that is you're open-minded, because generally employers will look for like people in like industries, and what you're saying is I can think outside of the box and bring in quality, not necessarily specific to job skill sets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
wonderful.
Because the skills are transferable.
Yeah.
They are transferable.
I had an experience where I had to take a test to turn in an interview panel, and I scored 100, and they said they were going to call me back in 2 weeks. And I followed up with them about 3 weeks after, and they said that I didn't score high enough. Apparently, you could have scored 105, and the person who scored 105 and higher, all of those were interviewed, and I was completely ignorant to that. So my question to you, now that we're talking about branding, how do I stand out from the rest of the people that are applying for different positions?
Ron, would you like to
You want
address
to try
that?
that?
How do you stand out from an interview perspective?
Yes.
Well, I mean, from my perception, as Zachary's perception is, you do come across very confident, very, very nice, and part of what you were saying before is attitude. In
Yes.
addition to transferable skill sets, it's attitude. And one thing, you were on the other side of the hiring process, but sometimes hiring managers don't know what they project. They don't know the body language that they put off. They may not be good listeners. But you've heard this before. I like to look at myself when I do certain segments to see what I can improve upon. You may not even know what you project. What I see is very positive, but I'm not looking at you in a totally interviewing light.
Right.
So what I would try to do is take a look at, maybe even have someone film you and see how you come across.
Okay.
Because we're continually fine-tuning this process. This is a process. There's components to this process, and if you don't hit every single component of that process, someone else, like that 105-point scorer, could take that position. So to me, I would want to know what I'm projecting, what people are perceiving me as, and then fine-tune that.
Okay.
That's what
a
I would
great
want to do.
idea.
Go ahead.
Excuse- I got 2 points. The first point is that I suggest to anyone, especially in an early morning interview, is you better find a way to get some energy.
Yeah.
I take a protein shake before I go into any business meeting, because you want to exude energy. I'm not sure how you come across, but if you come across energetic normally, but you come across somewhat subdued in an interview, find a way through that videotape to figure out how to get energized.
Right.
Second part of what you're saying, Michelle, is what I do, even from a business perspective, I want to know what that company is looking for. Then I can sell what I can do for them, because you can't sell if you don't know what you're selling. Too many people interview not really asking the right questions to be able to sell what they bring to the table. So to me, it's a two-way street. So when you're in that interview, instead of sitting there and answering questions, I'd be asking questions, because you're judged as much on the questions that you ask as much as the questions that you answer. So asking the right questions, to me, will give a very, very positive opinion from the people that are interviewing you.
Okay, we talked about the interview. Let's go back to that resume. You mentioned, Zachary, that has to be letter perfect. Can any of the experts think of a resume that you received that really knocked the socks off of you, made a great impression on you? Or perhaps those that did not make such a good impression on you and they're immediately disqualified?
Well, I think it's part of human nature to remember those that are the negative ones a lot more than the positive ones. But I have come across some where the humanness of the person came across. I like to see the fact that an applicant has incorporated in there that they have donated time at a homeless shelter, or that they have raised 5 kids and they have the management skills required to come in and handle a classroom setting. When the human element is interjected in there, that's something that piques my interest when I'm going through a resume. We can have the people who make the 105 on the tests, but how does that translate into productivity and getting along with the team in a classroom setting, in a boardroom setting, in a business setting? Those are the types of things, little nuggets of information like that I look for when reading a resume.
That's great to hear, actually.
Yeah.
Right. You could include your sports stuff, because if you're
Absolutely.
a team sports person, if you play, whatever the team sport is, that might give you, and it certainly gives me, an indication that that person could be a team focused person, as
Without a
opposed to a
doubt.
singular
Good point.
person. So
Except
that's
if they're on the opposing team,
that's okay.
right?
That's okay.
We should. And thank you all panelists for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And this has been Community Crossroads.